Jesus, someone's cooked bacon!
Oh God, what did I just pour into my gullet?
I'd have her.
I like them on my face.
That tongue was huge.
I want the guy to be hungry.
Welcome to the third episode of the long-awaited Amazing Race Australia 2 recaps from Reality TV Warriors. My name is Michael Harmstone, and joining me as always is the Canadian who we tend to cut off mid-sentence when he won't stop talking about collisions, Logan Saunders.
Good afternoon.
And the lady who is forever asking us how good she looks doing a podcast, Michelle Piss-Denovan.
Oh, Jesus, good morning. You won't let us do any video podcast. What are you talking about?
That's because they're not podcasts, Michelle.
Whatever you want to call them. Talking about a show.
Podcast is an exclusively audio medium. We don't need to rehash this argument like James and Sarah rehashing another fucking Coke
so
argument.
Pedantic.
You know who I miss? Adam and Dane.
No, you don't. Shut up. You know who I do miss? Sue and Teresa.
Oh, do you think they still use Aura spray?
Yeah, I think they do.
No, I think Sue and Teresa have become deeply into the goth movement now. They've abandoned all the hippie chic after the fact it didn't help them one iota in India. So previously, 11 teams flew to Delhi, where James and Sarah had a series of fights lasting over 9 hours. Shane and Andrew had a terrible tuk-tuk driver, Sticky and Sam had an early setback, but were the ones who won the leg, and Adam and Dane ran out of money and ran out of race, as they were the first team sent packing. And it is worth pointing out that this leg is the only one in Amazing Race Australia history without an official audience figure, at least until it's lower than the top 20 for the night, Amazing Race Australia 5 and 6, as this episode aired on 2 separate nights, depending on where in Australia you were.
What? That's why the recording's in 2 separate parts. But what? I don't remember this.
Yeah, so the schedule of the season is that it was Wednesday night for the first 3 weeks, if you weren't in the ACT, Queensland and New South Wales. The first 2 weeks aired on Wednesdays in those 3 states, or in those 3 areas. And this episode aired on the Thursday night. And then from episode 4 onward, it went to Monday night, took a break for the Olympics, and then came back with the last 3 episodes airing on a Monday, Tuesday, and a Wednesday as finals week.
So weird.
Yeah, this is a janky-ass schedule, and this is the first episode that it actually affects. This is the only one that still on the Wikipedia page does not have an official audience figure because of the fact that it aired over 2 separate nights.
Weird.
And therefore isn't in the top 20 for either of the nights. But you don't even have a number of viewers, as far as I'm aware. At least last time I checked, there's no official even audience figures for this episode as a result of it. And it's a real shame because this episode is hilarious. This is just an absolutely brilliant episode for unintentional comedy.
Yeah.
Arguably not as funny as episode 4, but this is a brilliant episode nevertheless. So, during the rest period, teams were transported by bus to Jaipur, the pink city of the Rajasthan, and when they rip and read, they find out they must now travel by rickshaw to the Red Elephant Temple to find their next clue, and they have a massive 35 didgeridollaroos for this leg of the race.
So, fun question for the two of you. See if one or both of you can answer this correctly. The Amazing Race has also visited 2 other cities referred to as the Pink City. What are they?
Yeah, I didn't know. As soon as they said the pink city, I'm like, what was the other one?
There's 2 other ones. There are 2 other pink cities that have been visited other than Jaipur.
Are you talking about any franchise?
No, both would be in the American version.
Yeah, well, one was literally this season. What was it? Oh my God.
I'm not watching this season, so I can't help with that one, I'm afraid.
It's this season, Logan. Where was it?
Toulouse?
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
And there's one more pink city that the American version has visited, other than Jaipur and Toulouse. There's a third one.
I don't know.
That would be Yerevan in Armenia. That's also referred to as the Pink City. So, how many, you know that the Amazing Race has been around for a really long time when there's three separate cities they can go to, where either Phil Kogan or Grant Buller is saying, oh, this is known as the Pink City. Well, guess what? There are other pink cities too.
I also wouldn't be surprised if Alan Wu did it, because I think there's at least one Amazing Race Asia leg in Jaipur as well.
Oh, yeah, he definitely would have said the Pink City. But it's just funny because it's, oh, this is the Pink City, that's the Pink City. Why not the Purple City or the Magenta City? They could have used so many different colors. I know, was it Morocco? With, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of that city in Morocco, the blue city that they went
Come on.
to. Chefchaouen? Chefchaouen?
So it's Sticky and Sam who leave at 9 o'clock in the morning, with Michelle and Joe at 9:02, Sue and Teresa at 9:36, Ross and Taryn also at 9:36, but not in the same shot, Kym and Donna at 9:39, Paul and Steve at 9:40, Shane and Andrew at 9:46, Joseph and Grace at 9:54, James and Sarah also at 9:54, and Lucy and Amelia at 10:04.
You should start making up really delayed times for when Lucy and Amelia start the leg.
Yeah, Lucy and Amelia at 10:04 p.m.
Yeah. How are they going to get the hell out of this one? And I know Paul referred to himself as an intellectual powerhouse. I think Sticky and Sam, when they read this clue, I think they're the real intellectual powerhouses.
Do you think there'll be elephants there? Yeah, red ones.
Yeah, it's the Red Elephant Temple they have to go to first, right? I think there's going to be elephants there, and they might be red.
And in case you didn't know that Ross used to be in sports, he reminds us that he insists that they need to be first place every single time. And Taryn says that she would like to prove that she's not just his little girl anymore. And then we get, yet again, an unaired task, because there is an unaired detour here, which is almost certainly the exact same one that Norway did when they went to the Red Elephant Temple, which was slow and painful or short and brutal. In slow and painful, teams had to lie in a bed of nails for 5 minutes each to get their next clue, and in short and brutal, teams had to individually walk across hot coals to get their next clue. The reason that we know it took place here is not only can you see a detail clue in Sarah's hand, but in addition to that, you can actually see most of the teams do confessionals in front of the hot coals.
Why don't they air this stuff? That would have been good, even if they just did it really quickly.
So let's say would you replace a task? Would you make one of the other aired tasks unaired for this leg?
No, I probably would have made everything
No.
shorter. The clay pots went for a long time.
Yeah, but the clay pots is very entertaining because nobody has the same experience.
Yeah.
And because it sets up the major storyline for the next 3 episodes?
Yeah, because if you think about it, you have Kym and Donna and Paul and Steve's confrontation. You have Lucy and Amelia just having a pure character scene where the kids try and knock all the pots off for them, and Amelia scolding Lucy in confessional about not using her school teacher powers.
Sarah?
You have just Sarah, yeah. Sarah getting her arse pinched and threatening to tell her child's mum. You have Sue and Teresa's diabolical attempt at this challenge and losing all of their pots basically before they've even left the start point. That's
Yeah.
4 different storylines that revolve around the pot task.
Yeah. I want to see who lay on the bed of nails, though. That would have been entertaining.
Shane and Andrew definitely did, because Logan got it out of Shane and Andrew in their interview.
Okay.
Other than that, I think most of the teams probably did the short and brutal, because unless it was a queuing thing, you can get that done in a minute
Yeah.
at most. It's a quick task. So the episode does then skip straight forward to the first aired roadblock of the season, which is Who's a Fast Learner. And in this roadblock, one team member must pass an Indian driving test in the streets of Jaipur to receive their next clue. And it is Michelle, Sticky, Ross, Sue, Kym, Paul, Shane, Grace, Amelia, and Sarah doing this roadblock.
Making Grace, Amelia, and Sarah learn how to drive in Jaipur and take the same lesson. What a hell of a trio that is to have in the same room together.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I wonder if the instructor just thought, well, whatever happens here, please don't sue me.
None of them had really learnt to drive a manual car until 2 weeks before the race. And it's not an excuse for Amelia, because her and Lucy were cast a year beforehand. If you know that you are probably going to get brought straight back, as soon as you have the time, you probably learn to drive a manual car and learn to swim and learn to do all the basic things that people moan about all the time on social media when people don't during the race.
And do you recall which sign of these made me laugh the most, Michael?
There's a few. Was it the Tonga one that made you laugh the most?
Tonga prohibited.
Yeah, because you take every opportunity you can to put in that picture of the Olympian from Tonga.
Yeah.
Of the what from Tonga?
The Olympian.
Oh,
There's a guy from Tonga who's been in the Summer and Winter Olympics.
really?
What does India have against him? Why can't he drive there?
He went viral on social media for being ridiculously attractive and oiled up at the Olympic opening ceremony,
Bizarre.
basically.
How bizarre.
Yeah, Eric and Rona wouldn't have been allowed on this season either. Well, Rona would have, but Eric, no.
So Michelle only learned to drive a manual car 2 weeks before the race, which seems like a rookie move. And Paul says he's here to win at all costs, but he doesn't want anyone to know that. And they immediately follow it up with Kym and Donna saying that they know that him and Steve are there to win at all costs and will burn people if they need to.
How does Paul think he is so? I don't. I. He just, as a person, he is so deluded. I just don't understand.
I will be defending Paul a little bit on these podcasts, I think, because yes, he's obviously delusional and uber competitive, but it's entirely how he was cast. He will be being egged on by producers going, go on, say something competitive. Go on, say
Definitely.
something competitive. And with the exception of like the confrontation with the tuk-tuks and stuff, he doesn't actually do anything to people's faces.
But in confessionals, I'm thinking, definitely some producer has told him to say some things because Steve's just sitting there and not saying anything and obviously thinking, Jesus, he's got to say this. And I'm not just going to say a thing in response because it's ridiculous.
You drove into me.
There are moments like the "you drove into me" bit where obviously Paul is just being a dick.
Well, he did more taunting. He did just like the starting line. He did the run backwards and taunt a random team just for the hell of it bit again.
I would say about 90% of Paul's content about being an arsehole is not to teams' faces. But he was obviously cast as being the uber competitive guy, and they wanted a complete buffhead. But I was cast as the completely competitive guy on the chase. It's the entire reason that I got through the audition was because I was ludicrously competitive and basically took over. So I can kind of see what Paul's up to. He knows what makes good TV, I think. There's a little bit of egging it on to make sure he gets airtime.
Yeah. He's still deluded though.
Oh god, yeah, yeah. He's completely crazy. But there's a little bit of producers egging him on. I think there's a little bit of him knowing what makes good TV, and everyone loves good TV. And then there's him just being a bit of a socially unaware prick, for want of a better term.
Jeez. Yes.
And this is the first episode where Shane and Andrew having terrible, terrible drivers is acknowledged.
Yeah, Shane and Andrew say that they do really well on the challenges, including the unaired ones, but not necessarily the travel aspects of the show. Which is a shame for them, because there aren't that many equalizers travel-wise.
And one thing I've noted in these 3 rounds is that whenever they play to Michelle and Joe's strengths, they get really far ahead of the other teams. When they do well, they do really well.
And one thing I've noticed is, as we mentioned last episode, the editors seem to like burying Grace by showing her mispronouncing things. So she pronounces "Welcome to Jaipur" as "Welcome to Jaipur," like she's a Chris Lilly character. Jaipur private school girl.
Sticky and Sam also have a terrible driver here, and then we get a very awkward confrontation between Sarah and Grace. Their first major direct confrontation of the season.
Yeah, so to put this into context, when we were on the Your Team Number group at the time, Sarah was on there quite a lot. Michelle and Joe did a bit. Steve's still on there, technically. He's still not left the group. Sarah has. But Sarah was saying and alluding to the fact there would be a massive confrontation between her and Grace, and how much of an arsehole Grace was, and how she's been getting a really sweet edit, but she's really awful in real life. This is the first time that we kind of see those two characters clash.
Before it was more just comments behind each other's backs a little bit, but it takes it goes to a whole other level here.
Yeah, because Sarah uses her assets to try and distract the other drivers and get her and James a head start, is the polite way of putting it, I think. Sarah would phrase it as showing off her buzzies. And then Grace tries to compete with her and says, "These are real, and my driver is vomiting right now."
Oh my God. It's not very, it's so awful what she says. I'm like, oh, I don't think this shows you in a good light, love.
And then
No.
Grace follows it up by saying that, oh, Sarah is ugly because of her eyebrows.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
And it's a bit tougher to say those things when you know, especially someone like Sarah who has clearly had some work done, that there could be some insecurities about typically people who get a lot of cosmetic
Yeah.
surgery have a bit more insecurities about their appearance. So to then go after the work she's had done, yeah, it's a bit awkward.
Bit of a low blow.
Yeah, so in episode 1, when I said, bear in mind that probably we are going to come to the conclusion that the villain of the season is not Paul, even though he's an arsehole, it is Grace. This is the sort of thing that I'm talking about, where Paul never crosses the line into personal attacks. Yes, he's arrogant. Yes, he's a complete prick. But he never goes after people in the same way that Grace goes after, especially Sarah. And knowing from Sarah's maths season, you're 100% correct. Sarah does still have those sort of self-esteem issues. And, I mean, she still is in the beauty industry. She was working as a beautician at the time that the season filmed. She still has a lot of those insecurities that you're picking up on there. And it is utterly disgusting to see how Grace treats her in this episode, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's the big difference between a Grace and a Paul. Paul is just going to say, I can bench press the Sydney Harbour Bridge. You drove into me. I am the intellectual powerhouse. But he's not going to say, oh, Sarah's Botox and eyebrows make me want to vomit. He's not going to say that.
Yeah, he's not going to go for the personal attacks. He's arrogant, but not the same level of arsehole that Grace shows in this episode. And to be honest, it doesn't let up for a few episodes. But yeah, I mean, Sarah is very upfront about the work that she's had done, but she obviously has some of those insecurities that you are picking up on. When you watch her on maths, you see a completely different side to Sarah, and she's a lot more vulnerable than she is in this season.
And one other thing to note, too, is that during this whole confrontation in the tuk-tuks, that Grace's response isn't a proportional response. Sarah's more of I'm going to essentially flash the driver to distract them. That's hilarious. And then making it into a fun thing for herself, as opposed to Grace saying, oh, mine are real, yours are fake. My driver is vomiting because of you. Completely different level of response there. All you can think is, well, that really took the whole fun out of that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sarah is doing it just to A, amuse herself, B, amuse James, and as James says in the driving school challenge, like, Sarah just doesn't shut up. Sarah's constantly talking. Sarah's constantly kind of entertaining herself. And Grace just completely takes it in the wrong way here.
Yeah, she's taking the fun out of the fun bags.
Way to lower the tone, Saunders.
Oh, well.
Nice serious discussion about
Just
body image
wow.
and insecurities, and Logan just goes for a fun bags joke. So Lucy and Amelia have a confessional where they say they want to prove how two nice people can win, surely. They're setting up a wonderful editor joke there. And I also love the optimism of Seven putting on the screen as their weekly poll, who will crash in the driving school challenge?
I forgot about those.
They drove into me.
Just heavily implying that not everyone's going to make it out of this challenge unscathed. Who's going to crash, do you reckon?
How many people will end up in the hospital? Will it be over under 4 people?
I know you made this point on your blog as well, but I think this challenge was pretty much impossible to fail.
Yeah.
Because if people could fail it, it would have been a closed loop, whereas it's just essentially a way of moving them from point A to point B in a fun way.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a lot of people do this roadblock not well and still get the clue.
No, I mean, Grace, for most of it, drove at 5 kilometers an hour. Like, that's not legal.
And Paul drove at 2 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, Paul kept stalling, which, when you're on a driving test in a manual car and you stall, everything goes out the window and you just panic. I was walking past someone earlier in the week, maybe back end of last week, who, because I live quite close to my local driving test centre, you see a lot of people on their tests. And I was walking across a pedestrian crossing and walked around a driving school car and then looked through the window to see that the driving school car that had obviously stopped on the pedestrian crossing accidentally had an examiner in it. Because the examiners all wear fluorescent gilets, so you know when they're on a test. And I felt so bad for the guy who was driving at that time. Because that's the sort of thing where you do it on your test. Believe me, I have experience with this. You do something stupid on your test, and you just know, shit, I failed. This is going to cost me another 120 quid or whatever it is now. Oh my god, I'm mortified. And I just felt so bad for him, because I've been there. So, in the case of Teresa being the worst backseat driver in human history, she then gets the aura spray out and sprays the guy directly in the face. And I'm sure Stu loved that.
That was my favorite part. Just, it's one thing for you and your partner to be in on the aura spray, but random East Indian driving instructor now has to suffer from the aura spray. He didn't consent to that. At least Teresa didn't use the pepper spray by accident.
If that was water, that would be fine. But it's going to be water infused with, like, rose petals and other bullshit. So that wouldn't have been entirely pleasant for him to get directly in the face.
Imagine if he had an allergic reaction. Our driver's passed out. How the hell do we drive this thing?
His neck just balloons. So the answer to the question that they put out, who's going to crash on the driving test, was technically Sticky, because a guy drives his handcart into Sticky's car when he's on the test.
How good was he with the stick shift? My God.
I know. It's genuinely impressive, but we did see that in episode 1, to be fair. It's not exactly a surprise that he can drive a stick shift or a manual car.
Well, that's what. No wonder his parents named him after that, after his stick shift.
Sticky Stick is his official legal name.
Yeah. Sticky Stick Stickerson.
And Michelle is the first to complete the roadblock, and teams are now told that they have to stack and deliver 75 clay pots on an ox cart through the market. Should they break more than 15 pots, they will serve a penalty when they arrive with the pots. And this was also a task in Amazing Race Asia 3, which was a detour, and an intersection task in Amazing Race Philippines 1. Sticky then finishes the roadblock in second, with Sue in third and Ross in fourth. And Paul says he's finding the driving embarrassing. He's confident at driving, but not confident having an instructor next to him, and as a result, keeps stalling the car. Shane said to Andrew when he knew that they were flying to India that there is no way they'll be driving in India. It's an absolute madhouse.
There's no way they'll make us drive there. In Jaipur, there's no way. We would die in 5 minutes.
Why have you turned into a Southern American? There was no Aussie there at all. Oh my God.
Oh, bless your heart, Logan.
He tried, but failed. He was heading down to Texas.
Hopefully at the pit stop to let us watch some John Wayne flicks.
I think it's fair to say, God bless this mess. And then in another ludicrous scene, Paul and Kym stop at traffic lights at the same time, so they decide to have an unofficial drag race in Jaipur.
The saddest drag race of all time.
And perhaps unsurprisingly, Kym actually gets off at the lights and Paul stalls the car again. The driving instructor actually has to lean over and help him restart the car, which is mortifying.
That's good. Love it. Love it when something like that happens to Paul.
Paul Montgomery is not Vin Diesel.
I think the difference between Paul and Grace is that obviously you're rooting against Paul and obviously you don't want him to succeed, but he's kind of magnanimous in defeat. Whereas with Grace, you don't realise how much of an absolute cow she is during this season until you think about it after the season and go, actually, Grace wasn't very pleasant, was she? I think Paul, every week you're kind of going, oh, I hope this is the one where he screws up. And with Grace, you never really realise that you want her to get a comeuppance until it's too late.
Yeah.
So Michelle and Joe have trouble moving their rocks at all, and when it does move, they lose about 20 pots straight away, as do Sticky and Sam. Sarah says she's only driven an automatic car before, and what could possibly go wrong with her learning to drive a manual in the perfectly quiet, not traffic-laden streets of Jaipur? And according to her insurance company, Grace does not have the best driving record.
You see Joseph visibly cringe while in the back seat.
And how good does she look driving a manual? Why would she even ask that? He's in the back seat. How can he even see her? And seriously, Grace.
And also, of all the people in the world you want to compliment you on your looks, not your brother.
No.
Just ask Suki and Jinder.
Exactly. By the end of this season, there is going to be a lot of Suki and Jinder references. You do not want another one here, Grace.
Oh, yeah, right.
So Sarah actually has a very good tactic when she's driving, in that she just constantly beeps the horn at people and they get out of her way. I mean, there have been stupider tactics on this sort of a challenge before. It's very resourceful from Sarah to think, I'm just going to make my presence known and tell people to move away from me. And then, as she said, Grace does ask how good she looks driving a manual, right after threatening to run anyone who walks in the street over, which I'm sure is a huge threat when she's driving at 5 kilometers an hour. People walk into the streets. Grace tries to run them over, but she's driving so slowly she just kind of bumps off them.
And then they end up, when she bumps into them, they just lay on the front of the vehicle because she's going so slow, and they're thinking, oh, free ride to where I need to go. I'll just hop off when I'm close to my house.
Yeah, what you can't see is that Adam and Dana are actually just on the side of the road going, come on, this is the only way we can make it to Qutb Minar. We don't have to sell our shoes if we do this.
For our rupiah. Our rupiah is no good here for some reason. We should have sold it for rupees.
Out of interest, what would be your tactic with the pot challenge?
Oh, God.
Just smash the 15.
I feel like there's only two legitimate tactics, which is either do what James and Sarah do in the end and think about it strategically, take your time, try and not get the penalty, or just go absolute hell for leather and go, I don't care about the pots, I'm just going to go straight there and serve the penalty and bank the time.
I'd always try and save the pots. I'd always try and not get the penalty, but yeah, you can only do what you can do.
I think the strategic move is probably just take the penalty, to be honest. Just go balls to the wall and go for it.
You had to load 75 on there, right?
Yeah, you had to load the 75. You didn't have to even make any effort to keep the 75.
Then I would just, find the same kids that broke Lucy and Amelia's pots and be like, okay, as we go along, feel free to smash every pot on this cart.
Just give them a baseball bat and say, have at it, kids.
Yeah, or give them a cricket bat, as Shane and Andrew would say.
But yeah, I would have used the teacher voice and been so ropeable at those kids. They would have just run a mile. Oh my God, I can't believe they didn't use their teacher voice.
Not being funny, Michelle, I would have loved to see you do this challenge.
Yeah,
because I feel like we either would have had really nice, sweet Michelle doing it really well, or absolute hell demon Michelle going,
hell demon,
get off those pots, you little shits, or I'm going to throw you in the oubliette.
Oh my God, I would have gone off.
There's no middle ground, I don't think, with this challenge.
There isn't.
It would either be lovely Michelle or get in the oubliette, you little shits.
Great.
There's no Nothing in the middle.
No, there's no middle. Correct.
So Michelle and Joe arrive with 48 pots and have a 15-minute penalty, as do Sticky and Sam with their 38. And Paul finishes the roadblock in 5th with Kym in 6th. When Sue and Teresa go to take off, the cart moves and almost everything falls off immediately. They've already failed the challenge, and it's not even begun yet. Shane then nearly hits a dog and gets himself cancelled by the audience, and him and Andrew leave in 7th. Like, even if this aired in 2020, when everyone hated cops, like, more people would have hated him if he'd run over a dog than if he was an out-and-out cop.
Oh, God, yes.
Like, it's a genuine TV trope to not kick the dog. It's a sign of a villain. I mean, Grace probably would have done it if the dog had walked out, but Shane and Andrew wouldn't because they're nice. Kids in the audience are just there for carnage, and they cheer literally every time a pot falls in the market, and this is even before we know that they're trying to throw them off and annoy Lucy and Amelia.
Yeah.
And then the big other incident of the episode, when Kym drives his cart past, and Paul's backpack accidentally knocks the pots off.
You drove into me.
And Kym and Donna obviously think that it was deliberate because they're already annoyed with Paul and call him a dickhead in confessional.
The buffheads are now dickheads, apparently.
Buff heads. They're not buff heads. They're not on Survivor.
We're wearing buffs and lights.
Michelle, I'm going to ask you first. Who was in the right here? Was it Kym and Donna, or was it Paul and Steve?
Look, you can't help where your backpack goes. Sometimes you don't know what you're doing with your backpack. I mean, Logan would know. He wears a backpack all the time when he's not traveling. Like, it's got a mind of its own.
The question, I think, is not necessarily who's in the right. It's if Kym and Donna hadn't already got pissed off by Paul, would they have taken it so personally when this happens?
Probably not.
It would have been funnier if Paul had just like jumped backwards onto the cart and then quickly hop off and say, "No, you drove into me."
I think that Paul was in the right overall. Did he lean into it? Maybe a little, because he knew it would be good television. But I think Kym and Donna allowed their hatred of Paul to cloud their judgment in this situation.
Yeah.
That's my ruling on it. I think obviously Paul knew what was happening as soon as he got brushed past with his backpack, and maybe he leaned back a little bit knowing that it'd annoy Kym and Donna because they have a very hair-trigger temper, and I suspect they may be fun people to mess with. But I don't think that Paul did it deliberately originally.
No, I don't think so.
It was a lean instead of a step, if I recall the instant replay bit I did on my blog a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think Kym could have probably tried to maneuver it a little bit more around Paul, but maybe he was looking for a scapegoat if pots started falling, knowing that Paul was there to take the blame. I mean, I'm glad that Paul did knock off a couple of the pots because it's hilarious television of Kym and Donna just genuinely fuming with him even hours later. And obviously it feeds into next episode, but it's just delightful television to see people get really annoyed at each other.
Do you think Kym and Donna protested the 15-minute penalty when they delivered the pots, you think, and say, well, that's not our fault because Paul kept smashing them?
I think I would not want to be any producer around Kym and Donna in this leg. I think they were probably quite warm. I think they were probably very pissed off. I think they were bored of Paul's existence by this point. And I think they were just looking for anyone to shout at.
Would teams have been allowed to just deliberately smash another team's pots and say, well, Paul would, like, for instance, if Kym and Donna had retaliated and just picked up a couple of Paul and Steve's pots out of anger and just smash them on the ground and say, oh, there you go, now we're even.
Could you imagine if they all just got into an all-in brawl with the pots and they arrived there and the guy says, yeah, penalty, you both have no pots.
You both have no pots and all four of you are bleeding and have bruises.
As much as I don't want to, for the second episode on the trot, reference Mark and Michael, going back to them sabotaging the bike pumps, they got a penalty because they impeded other teams from completing the challenge deliberately. I think if Kym and Donna had retaliated, they would have got a penalty, but Paul and Steve wouldn't have.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't deliberate that Paul's backpack knocked off the pots.
But Kym and Donna would have been furious if that was the ruling, though.
Yeah, Kym and Donna would have been furious regardless because they seem furious people.
I think Donna would have picked up Grant Bowler at the pit stop and just done a pro wrestling body slam on him.
No, I think Paul would have retaliated back again, so there wouldn't have been any pots left. Even if Sue and Teresa did it, Paul wouldn't have just got to the pit stop just with the alibi, oh, it was just my backpack. He would have shoved pots off theirs as well.
I don't think Paul would have retaliated because he knows the rules. Paul is antagonistic enough to teasingly do things to them and get away with it in the confines of the rules, which is exactly what I would do in the situation. I would look at the rules and see what the limits are. But I don't think he'd retaliate knowing that he would get a penalty if he did. And also, from Paul's point of view, if you're going to have a penalty with anyone in this cast, you probably don't want it to be Kym and Donna after you've crossed them, in that case, twice in the same leg. You would not want to serve a 30-minute penalty sitting next to Kym and Donna with a deeply awkward amount of tension there.
Fun for us.
That would be hilarious television, and obviously would have been the banner if it had happened, but I think Paul knows the rules, being honest. He knows what limits he can push. So once teams do deliver their pots or serve out their 15-minute penalty, they get another roadblock, which is who is the Stairmaster. And in this roadblock, which does not have to be done by the teammate of the person who did the first one team member must use a combination of 41 steps down and 10 steps up at the ancient step well of Amir to reach a guru who has their necks clear.
Can I say this challenge is something that sticks in my mind for 20 years? For me, it's one of the iconic challenges for me. And I always come back to thinking about this challenge and how hard it would have been with those stairs and getting the correct count. It's just one of my, I don't know, top 10 iconic challenges, which to some people might seem a bit bizarre because it's not that, it's not that memorable to a lot of people, but to me it is.
This challenge is very emblematic of the season because they obviously found this wonderful location in Jaipur when no Amazing Race has ever done a challenge like this and thought, how can we use this location and make it really cool, make it a memorable location, make it a memorable task? And yes, watching people walk up and down stairs is probably not the most interesting one for us to recap, and we will be rattling through it. But it's a beautifully set challenge and a beautifully thought up challenge, and something that, going back to something I love to harp on about on these Historians episodes, it's something you could not do anywhere else in the world.
I wish they would have shown the guru have his index finger out, just pointing the individual steps that each person was taking.
I'd forgotten how arsehole-ish the guru is to them. It's just
Oh
like,
my
no,
God.
go back.
Go back. Go back.
Go back.
Go back.
The best thing about it is the fact that because he's in this enclosed space in the ancient well, the acoustics on it are weird. So it sounds distorted when he screams, go back at them.
It's good. And you know what? This whole episode, I don't know why I was thinking of Logan, but because it was called the Stairmaster, I just kept thinking of the Keymaster and the Gatekeeper. And I kept thinking, is Logan taking this? Is he, putting these two bits together? I just kept thinking of it. Ghostbusters.
Well, let's be honest. If Logan and I were a team on this season, I would have done the first roadblock. He probably would have done the second.
Yeah, probably.
I would have had to do the first one because you can't drive.
Yeah.
But I think probably you would have got less frustrated at this challenge than I would.
Yeah, I would have had fun with this one.
Yeah, you're a lot more chill energy than I am. I would have probably worked it out like Paul did, to be fair, and gone, oh, I need to go up 2 sets of stairs. But I would have got far more frustrated far quicker than you do. So it is Michelle, Sticky, Taryn, Sue, Donna, Paul, Andrew, Joseph, James, and Amelia doing this roadblock. And Sarah says, thank God for Botox, as her face doesn't look nearly as terrified as it should be when she's driving the streets of Jaipur. Ross and Taryn have 64 pots left, so leaving third, with Sue and Teresa having 33, so having to serve a penalty. And making the most of their time, they decide to visit the children in child's jail behind the pot shop.
Yeah, why are they all behind bars? Was it for breaking pots?
Officially, it's a school, but actually, in reality, they were charged with breaking Australian teams' pots and sentenced to 10 minutes in pot jail.
Is that where they keep all the kids before they sent them to Qatar to build the stadiums?
Yeah. Nice dark joke there, Saunders.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing that lightens up an Amazing Race Australia podcast more than talking about child labour.
It is what it is. It's like the Ryan Seacrest bit when he was, I can't remember which award show he was hosting. It was right around when the time of when Kid Nation came out, and then he made an offhand joke like, "Oh, and yeah, the studio lights are really bright in here thanks to the kids from Kid Nation who are in the back room pedaling to power the stage. Keep going, kids, you're doing great."
So James and Sarah leave the first roadblock in 8th, and Kym and Donna have 30 pots left, and Paul and Steve have 35, so both have a very awkward 15-minute penalty to spend with each other. Shane and Andrew have 45 pots left, and as we said, Grace refuses to go over 5 kilometres an hour, but still leaves that first roadblock in 9th, with Lucy and Amelia in last. Sticky then solves the step puzzle in 2 attempts, as far as we know, and him and Sam leave in first, and teams must now find Naharaga Fort, the pit stop for this leg of the race. The last team to check in may be eliminated.
I wonder if Sticky learned how to complete the second roadblock after playing maybe Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone computer games with using the change in staircases. Maybe that helped him out.
I noticed on your blog you tried to sort the teams into Harry Potter houses. And I have to disagree that Kym and Donna would be Gryffindor. They would not be Gryffindor.
You don't think so?
Nah. Gryffindor's all about, like, bravery and honour and stuff.
I want to know what the houses are. Are Lucy and Amelia Hufflepuff?
I have no memory of doing
Oh,
this.
I want to know which houses each went into now. Lucy and Amelia, I think, are really Hufflepuff.
It's always funny when somebody on Twitter will tweet me something from my blog, and it'll be a joke I made 9 years ago, and I have to go, and they'll drop the joke without any context. So I'm just really confused as to what the hell they're talking about, and then go back into the blog and see, oh, I did make that joke. Okay then.
So you said that Sticky and Sam, Lucy and Amelia, Ross and Taryn, and Shane and Andrew were Gryffindor.
Really?
Yep. He said Hufflepuff was Adam and Dane and Ross and Taryn. You said Ravenclaw was Sue and Teresa, Joseph and Grace, and Michelle and Joe, and Slytherin was Paul and Stephen, James and Sarah. As a result, you did miss Kym and Donna, so Kym and Donna are assumed to be the other Gryffindor team in there. I don't think Kym and Donna are nearly brave or honourable enough to be Gryffindor, being perfectly honest.
Well, this was done as of episode 3, so I'm sure my houses would change by the end.
I think even as of episode 3, the amount of shit that they flung towards Paul and Steve in this episode,
The Lids.
I don't think that is a very Gryffindor trait, being perfectly honest.
I think they're more Ravenclaw.
Well, Ravenclaw's intelligence
Oh,
more than anything.
you think?
I think them probably more Hufflepuff, to be honest.
Well, they certainly turned into Hufflepuffs by the end of next leg.
Yeah, I don't think Joseph and Grace are really Ravenclaw either. I think they're I think Grace definitely is Slytherin. So Taryn and Michelle both arrive at the same time and use each other as a motivator to leave quickly, and both get rejected, and the guru screams, "Go back!" at them.
Go back.
And Taryn leaves the roadblock in second, and Ross realises that he has to trust Taryn and that she can do things without his help.
Or, as we also know, every freaking father and daughter storyline ever in Amazing Race history.
Yeah, you take mid-50s father, you take late 20s daughter, and you go, what is their storyline? The answer is this, basically. Interestingly as well, they had to pull numbers for the roadblock.
What do you mean?
31 and 10, right?
No, they had to... You know how you get, like, something like a skydive roadblock? Teams appear at the board and then have to pull a number for the order that they're doing. They had to do this in this one, because you see Sue and Teresa have the 4 number in their hand. So I presume that there was a capacity issue and that only a certain amount of teams would be allowed to do this challenge, but...
Well, you know why? Because there's no railings, and if you're running up and down, you could push someone off.
Yeah, but it never actually came into play in this challenge because nobody was really there at the same time. It was only 2 or 3 people at the same time at most. And Sticky and Sam have a bit of trouble with their rickshaw driver, and he tries to double the amount of money that they agreed originally.
What was the driver thinking? Because he would have seen Sticky and Sam just begging from all the locals to cover the bill for it.
Yeah. And he does end up letting them off with a couple of 100 rupee from what we see. The other interesting thing is, I think there may have been an unaired task here. Because Sticky and Sam talk about knowing that Ross and Taryn are in second. And Sticky and Sam were never at this roadblock at the same time as Ross and Taryn. They had no idea that Ross and Taryn were actually going to be in second place, as far as I can tell.
Mm.
So I think there may have potentially been an unaired route marker of some description, or maybe even an active route info between the second roadblock and the pit stop.
If only the jump cuts was as bad as with Sarah reading the clue, so we would know for sure.
I haven't gone back and tested my theory on rewatching the episode again, but I have a feeling that maybe there was something unaired there, because Sticky and Sam knew that Ross and Taryn were in second and keep talking about Ross and Taryn being in second and being right behind them. So they start begging, and eventually their driver lets them go, and they check in first to win a home entertainment system valued at $5,000.
By Bingley.
And that is a perfect prize for them, given that they were flatmates, so they can just share one home entertainment system, and they don't have to fight over it. Ross and Taryn then check in second, and Joseph and Grace get their clue almost straight away at the second roadblock. And then we get Sarah having her arse pinched and giving a child a death stare for repeatedly pinching her arse. Lucy and Amelia have the group of kids throwing the pots off the carts, and even though Lucy is a teacher, she didn't tell them to stop, and Amelia's a little bit incredulous with her in confessional. And Lucy and Amelia have 33 pots left, and James and Sarah have 64. Michelle does the second roadblock 6 or 7 times before leaving in third. And then Paul gives a confessional saying he knew that his gloating that he was Mr. Mental Performer would come back to bite him, so he needed to leave this roadblock in one attempt. And he treats the roadblock like a logic puzzle and leaves in one attempt in 4th place.
Hashtag intellectual powerhouse.
And how does being an accountant help you immensely with help just counting stairs? Like, God.
He does that all the time at his job. Whenever he goes on break and has to leave the building, he's like, okay, it's 8 steps down, and then I cross the street, and then there's a mall nearby, and it's about 13 steps up to the food court.
Sometimes I count stairs, but I don't do it all the time. It's so funny. I was out with someone the other week, and they said, oh, yeah, there's 16 stairs here. We'd walk down to dinner, and then he was going to walk back up. And I'm like, what do you mean? He said, oh, because I counted them on the way down. I'm like, okay. Like, just a random thing to do and actually tell people you're doing it.
I don't know this for certain, but I wouldn't be surprised if it came out that Paul does like logic puzzles and stuff for fun. Because speaking as someone who is just as competitive, although slightly less of an arsehole than Paul, I do have a puzzle magazine subscription, and I do puzzles most nights. Usually word puzzles, but I think Paul does have a similar kind of thinking style to me in that respect. So I did give him a lot of praise for treating it like a logic puzzle, because that's the way to breeze through this sort of a roadblock. Would
he be the Stanley Hudson then, and playing in his Sudoku book in corporate meetings?
Well, from my experience of accountants, yeah, 100%, he would just do puzzles in meetings. So Kym tries to have a word with Steve about the quote-unquote collision, but is cut off mid-sentence by Paul returning, and they leave in 5th.
Yeah, that was so funny to me. Where he's really eager to lecture Steve. Oh no, wait, we kicked your ass at this roadblock, so we can't have this conversation anymore.
Later, losers. And Paul and Steve, just to stick it to Kym and Donna a little bit more, have parked their tuk-tuk in the way of Kym and Donna's one, and apparently they pushed it in front of the tuk-tuk just to make sure they could beat them. I don't know how much of that was Kym and Donna's hyperbole and how much of it was actually real.
There just wasn't that much space to pull out of that area.
No, at this point in the episode, Kym and Donna are seeing every single fault that they can in Paul and Steve's behaviour.
Yeah, every action is a microaggression, which Paul is not the type to target an individual person repeatedly.
No, he's not Grace.
No, he's not going to, almost like a borderline bullying tactic of, oh, here's just one person I can just pick on every chance I get. With him, it's always going to be much more general ways of screwing with people, such as the running backwards while taunting and saying, oh, look at me, I can run backwards.
Do I think at this point Paul realised how much fun it is to wind up Kym and Donna? 100%. Do I think he deliberately targeted them all the time? No, of course not. But the problem is that Kym and Donna were just so blinkered by Paul's behaviour that they couldn't see the wood for the trees. It's harming their race because they are so laser focused on everything Paul does and not everything they're doing.
It's also funny that they become. You would never expect these two teams to have a rivalry for the first 3 episodes where they're consistently around each other, especially in these 2 India legs where they're almost always neck and neck. Who would have thought that?
Yeah.
No, they are absolutely obsessed with Paul at this point in the episode. And it's just not healthy. Run your own race, guys. Stop being so focused on Paul.
He's not even doing that well in the race yet.
No, I'm coming across as a real Paul fanboy in this episode. I really wasn't at the time. I was a huge Sticky and Sam fan at the time. And thought that Paul was a complete prick. But, I mean, when he's compared with someone like Grace, he looks a little bit better. So, Michelle and Joe checking in 3rd, and in a foot race to the pit stop, Kym and Donna checking in 4th, leaving Paul and Steve to be 5th place. Andrew leaves in 6th, as Shane said. They're good at the challenges, just not necessarily at the travel. And Grace says that she's glad she didn't do this roadblock, as she doesn't really like using her brain, getting her first episode title.
Oh my lord. Why would you want to say that? Like, you're on national television.
So, obviously, for the first, maybe, it'll probably cut down to about 45, 50 minutes of this episode, I've been quite hard on Grace. As soon as Grace said that quote, I have in my notes just, take 5 minutes to let Michelle rant about Grace, because Grace is everything you hate in a woman on this show.
Oh, she is. Oh my. And then why did she call Grant sir when she got to the mat? Yes, sir. Like, what? We're not in America. What is that about? We don't call
I
anyone
think Buller's
sir.
been knighted.
Yeah, unless you're a knight, you're not a sir in Australia. Really. You don't call anyone sir.
I'm starting the campaign now. Grant Bowler should be knighted for services to entertainment, namely putting up with these knobheads all the time.
One interesting note of gender difference here is that Sarah and Grace say, "Oh, I'd be hopeless. I'd be hopeless at this counting task. I'd be hopeless at this math task." As we see people such as Joseph and James do really well with this roadblock. We see Paul do really well. And then most of the women at this roadblock do not do so well. Or if it's a co-ed team, were there any women in co-ed teams who did this roadblock? I guess just Donna and Taryn. And Donna got destroyed by
Yeah.
Paul. And then Taryn struggled a little bit. No, that you didn't. No, because they were second. I guess we're sticking Sam ahead of them at the going into that second roadblock.
So Sticky and Sam, as far as we're aware, did not see any other teams at that second roadblock, which is why I think
Right.
probably another challenge we didn't see.
Okay. So Taryn didn't get overtaken by anybody.
Yeah,
Okay.
so Taryn and Michelle appeared at basically the same time, and then Taryn was out first.
But yeah, it wasn't a good look when you have, oh, I can't do this. Let my male partner in the team do this task. I'm hopeless. Numbers are tough. Math is hard.
And it's not like Sarah is a slouch in the intelligence department. She's obviously a little bit competitive and a little bit highly strung by her own mission, but I think Sarah is not necessarily unintelligent. I think it's just the fact that James was like, yeah, this is more suited to me, I'll do it.
Did anyone else catch on to the hilarious Teresa turned Mother Teresa outfit while she was waiting for Sue to do the roadblock?
Yeah, she just slowly
Yes.
adds more and more clothing.
What is going on?
The way that she had her head wrapped was just like Mother Teresa.
My favourite thing about the whole Sue and Teresa breakdown at this roadblock is the fact that you have Teresa doing all that, But then you have Sue using the aura spray in the one way that it is actually useful, which is to protect her from heat stroke, because she was out there for about 3 hours. At that point, she needed to get some fluid in her, whether that is spraying herself in the face with the aura spray, which at least will contain some water, or actually having a drink of water, which hopefully they were provided with.
I wonder if Teresa did do that intentionally, though, just so people would start calling her Mother Teresa.
Oh, jeez.
I didn't know that she was an Albanian nun in disguise.
The other thing about Sue and Teresa at the second roadblock as well is when Lucy and Amelia arrive. Obviously, at that point, Sue's been like, "Yeah, I've got hours buffer." We're still not seeing Lucy and Amelia. Soon as Amelia arrives and starts doing this roadblock and does very well at it for what it's worth, you contrast them, and I've mainly talked about this with the "No, it smells like shit" confessional from Major Race 25. But there's a brilliant example of this here, and a brilliant example of the editors pointing with a massive neon sign as to who you should support in this season. Because you get Sue going, "Oh, I'm really in my head. I'm really hot. I hate doing this challenge. I'm really struggling." And then the first words out of Lucy and Amelia's mouths, respectively, are, "Just try your best," and "Wow, this is amazing. I'm so glad I'm here." That is a huge, neon sign towards support Lucy and Amelia. They're amazing.
Did Sue have any sort of strategy with trying to do this roadblock, or was she just hoping to luck into a solution?
No, she got into her own head. This sort of roadblock lives and dies on how analytical your mind is and whether you can work out the best route. And Paul did it, and Joseph did it, Sticky did it in 2, and everyone who did it in 1 or 2 definitely worked out the tactic of this, which is, as Paul says, realize that the up steps are in groups of 5, so you have to go up 2. And the down steps are in groups of 5, so you have to go down 8 of them and work out what the final step is. Because the final step will be presumably your first one when you leave the start point. So as soon as you work that out, you have to just simplify it, go, I have to go down 8 and up 2, and then just work out your route.
You wouldn't expect it from a roadblock like this, but you did get to learn a lot about the individual personalities in terms of how they approach this roadblock. You wouldn't think of it just because it's 41 steps,
Mm.
but the personalities shine through for a lot of the contestants.
And the reason I think Paul does puzzle magazines is because this is literally a puzzle in the puzzle magazines. The steps puzzle is a classic puzzle that you see in these magazines. Not specifically 41 steps down and 10 up, but working out the best route up and down some steps and working out the only route up and down some steps is a classic puzzle you will see in every puzzle magazine.
I just love this challenge.
It's great. It's a sneaky, very clever challenge from both the producer's point of view and from the editor's point of view, as Logan said, of showing us how people approach these puzzles. Because puzzles, as a general rule, don't make for the best challenges for us to talk about.
No, because it's all cerebral and you don't see what's going on in people's brains, and they're generally just, it's not exciting to watch. But, if you're a cerebral kind of person, you can understand what's going on, and I think it's more interesting for those kinds of people to watch.
As a general rule with this season, this challenge is really good because it is pure character moments, even in a challenge that maybe isn't the best one to talk about with your friends and family or on a podcast as we're doing. But it's driven by the character moments and driven by Lucy and Amelia arriving and being really appreciative, even if they're in last place coming into this roadblock. Or Kym trying to have a chat with Steve about Paul's behaviour and Steve cutting her off mid-sentence and saying, "Later, loser." But everything in this challenge and everything in the good episodes of this season, looking at you, Turkey 2, is driven by the character content. And that's probably why I love this season so much, is because they know how good the characters are, and they have the trust and faith in the characters to drive the season rather than worrying about twists or anything like that.
One interesting thing to note, too, for these 2 India legs is Lucy and Amelia get that one task in each episode that barely allows them to survive. Because in episode 2, we had the dialogue bit from the Bollywood task where, because of the fact that they teach a foreign language, they can get through the dialogue quite easily. and also have those expressive personalities to do all the different emotions and actions as well during the Bollywood task. And then here in this round, the only reason why they overtake Sue is because, again, that teacher background of just getting to that stair puzzle and just having the experience of learning, the experience of teaching, of knowing how to break down this task to overtake Sue, who was just trying every permutation possible without even thinking.
Yeah, because after 3 hours, Sue is desperate at this point. At this point, they probably should have taken the penalty an hour ago, 2 hours ago.
Or just stop and really study the task. If Sue knew she had a huge buffer, it's like, okay, all I have to do is beat Lucy and Amelia, who probably won't be here for another 2 hours. Just let's break this down, and then we're solidly 5th or 6th this leg. She just does every random combination, it seemed like.
She just panics. There's no other word for it. She panics, and spoilers, she gets herself eliminated.
And then Teresa's probably yelling at her the whole time, like she did during the first Roadblock.
Yeah, because at one point she tells her to shut up.
Yeah.
So Amelia leaves in 9th and celebrates like she's checked in first, and she says she's not a puzzle person, but they aren't quitters by nature. And Sue finally leaves in last after 40 plus attempts.
Wow.
Tuk Tuk Reader says 192 rupees, but Lucy and Amelia are quoted 700, and they basically tell the drivers to shove off. And then they check in 9th, much to their shock, and Sue and Teresa check in last and are eliminated from the race.
I'm glad they did both India legs.
Yeah. Sue and Teresa in any other season would probably be the highlights. The problem is, this season they are in the top 10 highlights, being perfectly honest.
Yeah.
Even though they get knocked out in 10th place, they did really, really well for a 10th place team.
Do you know how well they did? Off the top of your head?
Their average, I guess it would be, two third place finishes and 10th?
As of the time of recording, which is 87 seasons into Amazing Race, they have the 6th best average of any 10th place team. And when this season aired, they had the 2nd best average of any 10th place team.
Wow.
They are still very, very strong stats-wise.
Oh, is it somebody like Allison and Donnie? I guess would have been higher at the time. Oh no, they would have been 5.5.
Sue and Teresa ended with 5.33, I think it was. And the team that went out in 10th in the season directly before this one, which must have been 22, is the only one that had beaten them up to that point.
Idris and Jamil?
It's Vietnam 1. Sue and Teresa ended with 5.67, and whoever went out in 10th in Vietnam 1 went out with 5.33.
Stats.
Big maths energy. They averaged 5 teams beaten per leg, which is equal to Allison and Johnny.
And they definitely would have been 4th or 5th this leg if it wasn't for a few flights of stairs.
Yeah, and I think Sue and Teresa are one of those teams that you could slot into any season and they would probably do decently well in any season. I think for their archetypes, especially of the kind of wackier middle-aged women team, you go, nah, they're not going to do that well. They'll go out really quickly. And actually, they surprise you.
Yeah, they didn't go home in 2.7 seconds like the vegan warriors did.
Yeah.
Yeah, for all their insanity that we see on screen, actually they're very competent racers. They had an issue in that Sue stressed out here and the aura spray couldn't save her. But I think in any other season, they would have made a decent run. They probably would have been maybe 5th or 6th in any other season. They just got unlucky here.
Curious why Teresa didn't do one of these 2 roadblocks.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they thought that Sue was a puzzler, but the heat, especially in Jaipur, was probably a factor that they didn't factor in.
Yeah, and maybe Teresa was sick that day, for all we know.
So, have you guys got anything else you want to say about this episode before we talk about the insanity that is episode 4?
No, I'd have nothing down in my little corner.
Anything else you want to bring up about Adam and Dane?
No.
The input from Michelle's Adam and Dane corner is empty this week. So next time, teams fly to Dubai, and let's be honest, Grace will probably pronounce it Dubai. The competition heats up, and one team doesn't even make it to the pit stop, as Lucy and Amelia get arrested.
So good.
I got goosebumps from watching this preview. I obviously know what happens, and I obviously know how insane episode 4 is. And I'll caveat it with, I tend to hate the UAE legs. They tend to be very annoying to me because the UAE is a very artificial place and it doesn't have the history that they can kind of base the challenges on. So it tends to be, oh, look how rich they are, or look how insane it is to have a ski resort in the desert. This Dubai leg, however, is amazing for all the wrong reasons. Have you guys got anything else you want to say?
No.
Nope.
Good. In that case, thank you for listening to our Amazing Race Australia recap. We'll be back next week to recap the amazing episode 4. Don't forget you can contact us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram, where we are RTV Warriors, or you can email us and contact at rtvwarriors.com. Logan is on Twitter at LogsQuacky, Michelle is Bear33333, and I'm Jay Harmstone. You can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/rtvwarriors. See you next week.
Bye.
Peace out and just chill till the next episode.